Obviously, with Liz Truss now being Prime Minister as of today, we now no longer have Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. He may not have been leader of the Conservative Party for the last 8 weeks, but he has been Prime Minister this whole time. You wouldn't know it because he's been fucking gallivanting off to fucking Greece and Slovenia, but he was technically still Prime Minister up to today, and he's now not. Today was the last day, or last morning, I guess, of Boris Johnson being Prime Minister. So what I wanted to have to do is a little bit of a retrospective of the last kind of 2.5 years, talk about Boris Johnson, compare him to other, Conservative leaders past and present, and future, even probably compared to Liz Truss as well. And then rank him. We'll probably rank him amongst the Tory Prime Ministers of the past 40 years or so. So, like, I've talked a lot on this channel about narratives and about framing, about how we talk about these people, right? Obviously, the thing that's really kind of been symbolic of Boris Johnson's premiership is law breaking and corruption and scandal. It's scandalous, the best word to describe it, right? It's always been, whether it's things like him promoting a serial sexual abuser that he knew to be a sexual abuser to a high ranking position in the Conservative Party, right? Him doing that promotion, him being caught partying during lockdown, contravening the rules that he wrote as Prime Minister, or helped write at the very least, or rubber stamped through his cabinet and through his party. Him breaking his own rules on multiple occasions in the most egregious way possible, and then getting fined by the Met for doing so. Huge amounts of billions of pounds of public money being paid out in crony contracts to people who knew members of the cabinet, who were pally with the Conservative Party, sons of lords, daughters of peers, people who donate to the Conservative Party, or even people who are happy to be able to wallpaper Boris Johnson's flags. The things treated fucking surreal when they did with Boris Johnson's flag, but that was other thing. The Green Seal Capital scandal, where David Cameron called up Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson asking, please, can you give you some public money to save the firm that I lobbied for? Owen Patterson's lobbying scandal. Fucking hell. I'm going to be here forever. Matt Hancock being handsy with someone else behind his wife whilst being health secretary. Jeez, that's not even thinking about the pandemic itself. When he was going into the Brexit negotiations, he was saying fuck business because he didn't care about the thing that Conservatives are supposed to care about. I also think fuck business, but probably not in the way that Boris Johnson thinks. There was then going into the pandemic, there was let the bodies pile high, him explicitly saying he didn't want any more lockdowns, not because he didn't think they were efficacious to be able to save people's lives, because he thought they were politically optically bad for him with his own voter base, or because he didn't believe in them ideologically. Him locking down too late because we were getting reports of the army being called in Italy to help people cart away dead bodies at the start of the pandemic, whilst he was busy doing nothing, talking about herd immunity. We have then him coming out of lockdown too early in the September of 2020, massively spiking cases way above the original peak, which we were supposed to be locking down to be able to protect from, and then also encouraging people to go out and eat food in the most absurdly titled scheme called Eat Out to Help Out. And then continuous, just not getting lockdowns right. God, there must be other things that I'm missing here, because it feels fucking tumultuous this entire time. But in general, his career up to this point has just been, he's always been a political backstabber, right? In that he never supported Brexit up until it was politically convenient for him to support Brexit, right? And then when it came to Brexit, it was never about appeasing the whims of the people who want Brexit, or even the people who will stand to benefit from Brexit. It was all about what was optically going to be best for him at the end of the day, right? So I've talked on this stream a lot about the Northern Ireland Protocol and the threat that poses to the Good Friday Agreement. And so he went into the 2019 election on the back of "Get Brexit done" was his literal slogan, right? It was nothing other than a Brexit. No one paid attention to anything he said that wasn't Brexit related, right? Including ridiculous, promo shots of him driving a bulldozer through a fucking wall. That's how fucking low things got. And he ran on a platform of having an oven-ready deal that he'd negotiated that he could then get Brexit done straight away. Now, what actually was the case was that the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is his solution to the border of Northern Ireland. So people who don't know that the Good Friday Agreement basically means that there needs to be a soft border. There can't be a hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. So the Northern Ireland Protocol was a compromise where the hard border became along the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, so they could maintain kind of de facto EU membership for Northern Ireland to be able to maintain a soft border between the two countries. And he negotiated the Northern Ireland Protocol with the European Union under the full knowledge he had no intention of honouring it when it actually came down to trying to get Brexit done, quote unquote, in his words. Because we're still fucking dealing with this mess 2.5 years on, right? We're still, and then, so what happened is he actually, he told Ian Paisley Jr. that he never intended to honour the Northern Ireland Protocol. It was just a patch job to be able to lie to the British public about having an oven-ready deal and having the ability to get Brexit done. And now, Liz Truss, who is going to have to go and renegotiate that deal with the European Union again once she becomes Prime Minister, and then possibly have to leave the ECJ, because that is part of one of the things that might also contravene the Good Friday Agreement if we don't have the European Court of Justice maintaining the relationship between those two states. So he literally won an election off a straight up lie. He did not have Brexit. He had no plan for Brexit. We're now seeing the faults of the disastrous planning that he's had around Brexit. Like, I believe I fully believe, right, that there is a workable version of Brexit. I don't think it's good necessarily. I think remaining will be better. I know left boys will hate me for saying this, but I do believe that, at least in the short term, remaining in the European Union is probably good for working people in this country, especially considering what Liz Truss is going to do to our workers' rights. But nevertheless, even if Brexit does have to happen, there are definitely ways of mitigating this, and also ways of mitigating it whilst maintaining the Good Friday Agreement, staying in the customs union, joining EFTA, right? There are loads of ways in which we could save this, and they're not doing any of it because it doesn't appease the red lines of the ERG, right? And one thing I really don't want to happen is there to be war in Northern Ireland or across the Irish border. And Boris Johnson is so fucking, so much of a kind of a political chancer, essentially, that he's willing to essentially tear up the Good Friday Agreement. And Liz Truss is the same. She's happy to tear up the Good Friday Agreement just to be able to get the vision of Brexit that makes enough people in little England happy for a modicum of political gain, right? I mean, they will have war in Ireland, or at least terrorism in Ireland, because of the completely wanton policy making of Johnson, and then theoretically Truss in the future as well, right? So there's a lot of things that Boris Johnson has done wrong. Huge amounts of things that Boris Johnson has done wrong, right? Is he the worst Prime Minister of all time? No. No, he is not the worst Prime Minister of all time. People will hate me for saying this. They'll when I put this segment on YouTube, they go, "No, Justice, surely you jest from all of the stuff that you've just said there. Surely Boris Johnson must be the worst Prime Minister of all time." No, I would not say that he is the worst Prime Minister of all time. So I'm going to make a comparison between him and David Cameron. So when you look at the issues of what happened due to COVID, right? Actually, there's probably slightly more people died from COVID now than died because of austerity. But at least there was a plan in place, right? At least they decided to do the furlough scheme. We don't know how many excess deaths that would have been if they'd taken any different action over the course of the day. We got the furlough scheme, we got cost of living payments out of Rishi Sunak, right? We got some break from the neoliberal orthodoxy and austerity politics of the Cameron and Osborne administration, right? Who made a political choice, right? They made a political choice to essentially sentence hundreds of thousands of people to their deaths, right? Because we know that now. We have studies showing the excess deaths that were caused by the aura of austerity, the era of austerity, sorry, right? Plus the fundamental changes that happened under David Cameron, like the Royal Mail being privatized, that happened under Cameron, was bombing Syria was the end, like just at the back end of that, right? The fucking humiliating disability assessment, like work capability assessments people had to go through, right? All of that shit that happened during the Cameron administration, right? The economy was completely destroyed. There was like even bigger transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich under the Cameron administration than there was under Boris Johnson, right? And we almost had the double dip recession because of that. It was bad for economic growth. It was bad for the people of this country, and it was humiliating for everybody, right? And I think that in general is just worse than, like, political corruption has always happened under the Conservative Party, right? There was almost certainly political corruption happening at the time during the NHS privatisation, all the kind of private deals that they were doing around the back. It was just, once it had a nice face, right? Once there wasn't a rascal in charge of it, wasn't there was somebody who had such poor public PR that the media tried to turn against him and actually hold him to account for the first time in fucking history, right? It's only because we had such a spotlight on Boris Johnson because of his buffoonery, because of, scandalous things that weren't really that bad in utilitarian sense overall. Things like Partygate, things like Owen Paterson, things like some of the contracts that were given out. They were scandalous, they were bad, but were they as ruinous to the country as the politics of austerity? I would say no. And you'd say, right, well, surely, hang a minute, if you're saying Cameron is that bad, then surely the Thatcherism, right? Thatcherism is the ideology that David Cameron purported to support at the time, right? Surely that means that Thatcher is worse than Cameron. And I think I disagree on one grounds, really, in that with Thatcher, right? You may disagree with her politics, and I do, and you may think that she was ruinous to the economy, and she was. She did plenty of terrible things, right? But she at least saw a problem. She saw a problem and tried to fix it. And so these people from the Chicago school, they have this idea. Let's see if I can implement that and try and fix the country, try and make things better. She at least had some vision of how to make the country better, at least in her own eyes. Obviously, she's wrong, but she at least had that vision to begin with. Did David Cameron have vision? Did David Cameron have some kind of plan to make the country better? No, he did not have a plan. He had two things. He had money in his pocket from people that he knew that he was in the pockets of, all the big businesses that he was fucking, he was chowing down on the dicks of, right? Fucking guzzling their fucking semen, right? And the second thing he had was a religion. The religion of Thatcherism. Which is what we have now under Liz Truss, right? Do they actually believe that they're making the policy decisions that make the world better? Do they have any empirical grounding for any of this? Do they want to try and fix a broken society or broken economy or broken country? No, they don't want to do any of that. They have just been told since birth as received wisdom, as have many of us because of the neoliberal apparatus of the media since then, that the only possible way of running the country is neoliberalism. And any break from that would make them unconservative. Because that's not how the Conservative Party worked pre-1979, right? In fact, some of the inflationary pressures that we saw in the 70s were due to quote-unquote reckless spending by Barber under Heath in the early 70s, right? The Barber boom, as it was called, right? Which then obviously was a fine level of public spending, but was impacted by the oil crisis of the 70s, which is sort of seeing what we're seeing the impact with the energy crisis now. It's a similar kind of situation where external pressures, make it, the additional spending that was made, like the impact of that becomes worse, right? You remember that when I talked previously about council houses and the huge amount of council house building that we need now to fix the housing crisis, those council houses were built by Conservatives. They were built by administrations in the post-war period who were conservative, who were part of the Conservative Party, right? This fundamental ideological shift post-Thatcher is nothing to do with conservatism at the heart of the party, right? It's entirely to do with a religion that these people follow. That Major followed, that Cameron followed, and that May followed, and that Boris Johnson mostly followed, but kind of broke away from. Like, if in some ways, the scandalous nature of Boris Johnson's premiership actually led to him making better policy at the end of the day. Because things like the cost of living payments that were done, things like furlough, right? If he didn't want to just be the person who was liked as Prime Minister, do you think he would have done them? Do you think we would have got the cost of living payments if the Sue Gray report wasn't in that same week? Of course we fucking wouldn't. But he was so desperate to cling on to power that he was willing to break away from conservative orthodoxy. You've seen all the left, like Nigel Farage, fucking Jess Gill, people out here saying that they believe that Liz Truss saying that she'll rule as a conservative is good because they think we've had none of that for the past 2.5 years, right? This break away from conservative tradition, as that they feel it, is not really a break away from conservative tradition. It's a break away from neoliberal tradition. It's a break away from Thatcherism because it's nothing to do with the efficacy of the policies. It's the religion of the Conservative Party at this point right now. In the same way that Trumpism has become the religion of the Republican Party of the United States, where it's a cult of personality almost, right? Where they follow the dear leader wherever he may take them. In the Conservative Party in the UK, it's an ideological, dogmatic religion that they follow, right? And people on the left are probably reasonably guilty of doing that to some extent too. But the fact that the right have been in power for so long, and people who they've influenced, people like Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, have been in power at that time as well. Like, we've had no real break from the ideological strain of neoliberalism that we've had for the past 40 years. No one's ever broken from that. The fact that they've been in power for that long, have seen the fact that this is continuing to not work, wanting to then double down like Liz Truss is doing, that makes it 100,000 times worse than fucking a bunch of ultra communists who will you are literally waiting for the revolution and won't actually do any work until then. Like, that's 10 times worse. 10 times worse. They've seen the ruin and the failures of neoliberal policy the past 40 years and thought, I want more of that because this is the religion that I ascribe to. If it's not working, we can't not trust the process. We have to continue doing that. And that's why Boris Johnson is a better prime minister, albeit different shades of shit, right? Just a lighter shade of shit than David Cameron. Probably better than Thatcher as well. If I had to rank prime ministers of the past 40 years, it would definitely go Brown, then Blair, then May, then Major, then Johnson, then Thatcher, then Cameron. That would be my ranking of the prime ministers since Thatcher. So people who are trying to, again, you look at people, as I said before, trying to tie the issues that we've seen now to Boris Johnson as a political character, rather than the Conservative Party ideologically. These people are going to fail and they're going to lose because they don't realise that they need to break away from the religion of Thatcherism at the end of the day. And Boris Johnson was a horrendous man, a terrible human being, right? Fucking vindictive and nasty person. Guy who conspired to beat up a journalist, lying to the electorate wholesale to try and win elections over somebody who promised actual change. Who done horrendous things, from an optical perspective, like promoting Chris Pincher and all of the crony contracts, all that kind of stuff. Let the bodies pile, all these horrendous comments, right? But at least he was so brazen enough to diverge away from the party orthodoxy in a way that is better than his predecessors, quite frankly. But am I glad to see him gone? Yes, because I am glad to see the back of him. I just wish he wasn't being replaced by literally the only person they could possibly choose who would be worse. And if you enjoyed this segment, please consider liking and subscribing. You can now become a member for 99p that gets you emotes. If you do enjoy the content as well, you can click the bell. It'll notify you when I go live and when I upload new content. I do appreciate everyone watching, and if you got this far, thank you for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.